can. That's absolutely fine. Great. Yeah, and you can always go back if that happens. For anybody you've got to peel off, you can always go back to the video once it appears for you there to catch up on stuff. So that's great. Right, okay, let me start with a share. Going over what you should have again now is the building the team dynamic piece, session 6. Give me that thumbs up so I know you're all seeing that. Great, thank you, wonderful. I'm going to reduce that, put my chat box back up again. Oh, it is that escaping chat box. There it is, got you all back again. So building the team dynamic. You can see our journey now. You can see that it's almost an incremental journey, isn't it? We're beginning to pull it together, and then in our final sessions tomorrow, looking at embracing the challenges and drawing it all together. So what do I intend to cover in this 90-minute session? I want to take us through the life cycle of teams with some reference to a model, but then how we can use that model to support our teams as they mature through the various stages. I want to refer to the characteristics of the effective teams, and then point you in the direction of a questionnaire which is embedded in one of the appendices of the workbooks. I want to refer to an author, Patrick Lencioni, around the 5 dysfunctions of a team and what he offers us as wisdom in order to put some actions into place for ourselves as managers and for the team. And then I want to go through the leadership continuum and situational leadership, and to do that by looking at some case studies, because again, that really starts to get you to apply some of the models that we have been using through this program. So by the end of today, you will be able to describe the life cycle of team development. You will have done a degree of assessment of your own team against it as well. You'll have identified the characteristics of an effective team in order to cultivate those associated behaviours, explored a little bit of the 5 dysfunctions, and by undertaking the case studies, that will enable you to recognise further any need for you to develop skills and behaviours so that you can be flexible in adapting your management style to different situations. So that's our direction of travel. So let me start with my reference to Bruce Tuckman and his life cycle of effective teams. Got a couple of images coming up for you here, so I'm going to deal with this one first. And it's all about how teams mature over time. Now, it's very rare that a whole team would be appointed in one go. However, I have had the privilege, challenge of working in that very situation when I was appointed as a consultant to a team newly appointed to a museum in the Midlands in the UK quite a few years ago. And this, it was around, it's called the Galleries of Justice, so it still exists today. So it's one of the old court buildings in Nottingham, which was then renovated back to how it used to be in the 19th century. And aside from, you know, the massive renovation of it as a building, it was timed so that the opening was going to take place at Easter. You know, when in the UK, we get a bit of spring weather and people start going out and stuff like that. So it was perfectly timed. And they recruited a large group of people for the museum. It feels to me now, with my memory, of something like about 35 people were recruited, but no one was recruited to any one specific job. They were just all told there are some vacancies coming up, looked at CVs, there'll be places for all of these people, but we don't exactly know which jobs they will have. So there I was with the chief executive. We'd got a massive room and in a hotel, and we'd simply put a circle of chairs around. And she and I would, you know, we met people as they arrived and ticked their names off and said, please come in, please have a seat wherever you like. And I'd now like to take you on a journey through that very story. Hopefully you're already there in your mind's eye. So there you are. you are one of those 35 people. You're seated in that circle. You can probably imagine that there's just silence in that room, no matter how outgoing, and I've got a lot of outgoing people in that room, it turned out, but at that moment, the room really was pretty silent. If any of them had greeted each other, and a few of them did, they did so politely, formally, briefly, and then guess what? They all got their cell phones out and were looking at their cell phones. So their eyes were down. They were not really interacting with anyone. So look at this first image I've got under Tuckman's life cycle of teams. Forming, perfect circle. And the other word that comes to my mind here is conforming. All of the social norms that we have been brought up with and we know to use in that business setting. And then the chief executive and I came in and we gave the whole group a collective task, and we gave them a limited amount of time in which to complete it. And then we stepped out. We just let them get on with it. We expected them to get on with it. And they were slow to get going, but a few people started to kind of make some suggestions. In fact, a few leaders started to emerge with taking the work forward, because now people realizing they've got limited time in which to achieve this. But a few others started, you could see the reactions. Oh, I'm not sure that I like that suggestion, or the way that person has suggested it. So my next image here is of a storm cloud with some thunderbolts and lightning coming out of it. So people were a little bit now more on edge with each other as much as with the task itself. They, however, were successful in completing that task, and obviously we acknowledged that, and we were using that as an assessment centre to think about where we might be able to position people in the eventual opening. We then moved on to all sorts of other pieces as part of the training and the development, and when we gave the whole group again another task to do collectively, one of the things that we observed was that there came a suggestion from the room that we should actually agree some rules, ways, some protocols, ways of working. So there we are, they had now moved into the norming phase. So I'm representing that here by a perfect square. And part of that was because people had been pretty uncomfortable with that storming. So we don't want to go back there again. So we want some rules and protocols about the way we work. And they did indeed set them, and they started to work well. We actually worked with them for a whole 2 weeks before the opening of the museum. And actually the performing stage, which is now the block arrow that you can see in front of you, we timed the whole thing so that we actually opened the museum about 3 days before Easter. And we invited local business people. You know, we went around the local offices and said, please come, send some people over as if you are going to be visitors to the museum, because we want to use this as an opportunity to trial it. And actually we saw them begin to perform and begin to find their feet. Now that's kind of a route map that one will generally see as a team matures over time. What also happens, though, even in an unusual situation like that, is that not everybody stayed for the same amount of time. You know, over time, some people left and went away and left the organisation, went and did other things. And guess what? There was a kind of a sadness that began to emerge. People were mourning the fact that they were losing colleagues with whom they were now familiar and comfortable in working with. And guess what happened? New people came in, and so there had to be a reforming, and so there was a kind of a catapulting all the way back to that as an image. That same journey might also be represented in this second way. So as a wave, you see it the way you have, however you see it. I'm sure you can all already get a sense of your own team traveling that particular journey. You'll see a different word there as well at the end in this second image, and it is that of adjourning. So it's that kind of moving on to a different stage, or going back then all the way to the beginning. I am also extremely indebted to a dear consultant colleague of mine Who's come up with another present participle word as a substitute for either the morning or the adjourning stages? And he has suggested that some teams actually move into a snoring stage. And I absolutely love that. And if, yeah, look, I can see around the room. You think about teams that you've worked with, you've seen them, you've probably gone on that journey now in your head. You saw them form, you saw them storm, you saw them norm, you saw them perform. But then there was no next new big challenge that came along. So they all kind of nodded off a little bit. You know, they took their eye off the ball. And actually at that time, you kind of need to G them up a little bit with a next challenge to keep that momentum going. So I absolutely love my dear friend Zubair's description of the snoring stage. So hopefully in terms of a set of images that all makes sense to you. I'm sure a good number of you will have come across Tuckman's life cycle before, and therefore what I share with you here are some other descriptions of that. You can glance through that really quite quickly now at this stage. I hope that my own story, setting it in an experience of mine, also replicates what you are seeing there in those slightly longer descriptions. So at this stage, I'm going to ask you to go into a first set of breakout rooms. And your task is going to be as follows. Your challenge is to think, which phase is your team in? What are the telltale signs? How does it feel to you as the manager? What's the climate like? How do you think team members are feeling? How should you, the manager, be responding to this? So I'm going to hand over to Lucy. She'll pop you out into your rooms. When you come back, I will take some feedback, and then I will be going pretty much straight into a poll. Over to you, Lucy.
Okay, hi everyone. Kindly take a photo of the question before I move you in.
Good point.
Okay, so here we go to the groups.
So if I just get a bit of a feel from the room, I'm not asking you to take me through each of these bullet points here, but if I could just have a little bit of insight from each room about whether you were familiar with that as a concept, and any of those particular questions on the screen right now that added some value to your thinking about the relative maturity of your team. Can I be reasonably directed at this stage? Room 1, where we had Holly, Shannon and Zach. Would one of you like to come in for me, please? Looking up and down.
Hey, I can speak.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Sure. So I think we had a range, one in forming, and went through the context of adding a new ownership to that team, one in storming, lots of stress in terms of the climate, and this was in response to COVID in certain areas that are particularly hard hit. And then another talking about how as a manager, they manage a number of teams and how, okay, so trying to evaluate as opposed to their single team, where each team was, and then as the supervisor of those teams, what can she do to help support them, get to the next stage?
Yeah, super. And that's right, lovely. Landing on that final question, that's exactly why I wanted to get you to do this. It's thinking about how you can therefore help the team to continue to mature and develop. So Zach, thank you so much for that, very helpful. Let me turn to room 2. We had Heba, Mara and Tariq in there. Would one of you like to give me a few quick insights, please, in similar fashion?
Hey,
Thank
Tara,
you.
do you, yeah, which one of you would like to speak up? I can talk too if you prefer.
Yeah, be bold and take it. If your colleagues are silent, just be bold.
Okay.
You're getting to know each other
All
by
right.
now to do that.
Well, guys, chime in, but I think we all actually agreed that we think that we're all in the norming stage, experiencing a lot of growing pains within our organizations and teams due to COVID and for other reasons. So you know. There are things that could, the team is performing, but we know that they could perform better and together as a team. Guys, did I characterize that okay?
Wonderful. So you've got support there, Pam, from Tara. So I can see that with the thumbs up from her. That's great. Thank you. I've got two other rooms who are still welcome to come in. I had room 2 with Heba, Mara, and Tariq, or room 4. I don't mind. Who would like to take it? Room 2. Heba, Mara, and Tariq. Would one of you take it for me, please?
I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Mara.
We had different phases that we were at. You know, 2 of us felt like we were somewhere between norming and performing, and the other the team was still in storming. We all agreed, like the other group mentioned, that right now, you know, the external things going on with COVID and other things in the world are, you know, for kind of shifting where our team is, and ultimately came to the conclusion that, you know, as the leaders of the team, that, you know, some things we can do is keep establishing the vision and, you know, trying to do, you know, best practices to keep that team moving forward, because, you know, even if your team gets to a certain place, there's other factors like lots of change, or like I mentioned, the things going on in the world that are challenges all the time, especially lately.
Yeah, absolutely. Super. Thank you very much for that. And my final group, Bridget, Daniela, and Gibson. Anything from you where you would just like to bring in a few comments for me, please?
Sure. The thing that one of the things we noted was that it's a little difficult to kind of apply this cleanly because of kind of the rotating semi-mess that is a lot of NGOs hiring processes, you know? And so for a lot of these things, it feels like, you know, within one component of a team, we're in one phase, and then within another component where we can be in a very different phase. Yeah. And so trying to figure out how to align those more than anything else was the main challenge. And so, yeah, kind of looking to find the ideal moments to you know, bolster the team when we're in kind of the snoozing phase. Was one of the challenges, or one of the places we're looking for a reaction, right? A manager response.
Yeah, super. I'm sure you're absolutely right. No model is perfect. We could all look through different lenses at the same team and actually see all of these at play. So I absolutely acknowledge that. I think, again, it's hopefully my use of models trying to give us a language at least to talk about some of these things and address them. Fantastic. Now, staying with that, almost the last question that's there on the screen, how should you, the manager, be responding to this? And you having your feedback already begun to address this. I'm going to hand now straight back to Lucy, because Lucy has got a poll set up for you where she's got a series of questions, some 5 questions, multiple choice, and it's what you should do as a manager. And you're faced with each of those phases: the forming, the storming, the norming, the performing phase. So what should you be doing as a manager to in each of those to assist the team? So let's run that poll and see where we go.
Okay, here it goes.
Right, I'm watching the poll as you're coming in now. It's starting to land here. So we've got some variability I can see in the responses. So there's a few strong leaders though in some of them. I can see I've got 4 of the 13, 5 of you 13, so 38% of you have voted. So far, it's now over 50% of you have voted. So is that beginning to pitch the responses in any way? A little bit. 70% of you have voted. So last few people coming in now with the votes, very nearly there. 12 of 13, so 92% of you have voted. So just got one more person. We'll just leave it a few more seconds to see if it comes in. I know one of you at this stage, I think your system froze. Like, oh yeah, we're in, it's done. Right, okay, we can end the polling now. That's wonderful. Thank you, Lucy. And then we can share the results. Are we sharing the results? Yeah, lovely. Share the results. Yeah, back again. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. So keeping your eyes fixed on the description that I gave you earlier, in the forming stage, the front runner of all of these is provide a clear direction and roles, and then the second one is encourage participation. So what Bruce Tuckman would have suggested is that at that stage, it's about providing clear direction and roles for the team. So that's where they are. But I'm very interested to see what came in second there, the encourage participation. Look what's happening in the your answers to the second one, which is your team is in the storming stage. In fact, it's a dead heat. Look at that, between providing clear directions of roles and encourage participation. And here it's about encouraging that participation. It's about breaking. Do you remember my analogy of the storm cloud, where people are a bit more suspicious? They're kind of trying to get a good position for themselves. And so it's that encourage participation, because we need to get people to understand each other better. So that's interesting that those two have come out as the clear front runners from you as a group in response to that. Okay, so let's look at the third one now. So this is where your team is in the norming stage, and we have a front runner of capture best practices, and then a second is coming in as celebrate milestones and achievements. Now here, the one that Bruce Tuckman nudges us towards is in fact delegating some tasks. And I think that he does that because it's about, the team is now normalized, it's now got some rules, it now needs to be able to get itself ready to move to performing. But if you're going to do that, then you need to give some responsibilities for moving some tasks forward. I guess the argument would be, are you quite ready yet to celebrate milestones and achievements? They've normed, your team's normed, but to what degree do you have full evidence of milestones and achievements? So that's where that thinking is slightly there. Let's look now at the fourth one. So the fourth one at the performing stage, and look here, there is a definite front runner of celebrate those milestones and achievements. And that is what Bruce Tuckman would say, because now it is performing, it is time to actually recognize what the team has achieved. So yeah, start those celebrations. And therefore, what have we got in this final one? Look at the front runners. We've got celebrate milestone and achievements at 69%, and we've got capture best practices at 62%. Bruce Tuckman would nudge us towards capturing best practices. And here I think the basis of that is that, yes, there are, of course, still milestones and achievements to be celebrated, but now it's about consolidating that. So if you think about the language of either mourning or adjourning, so that word for me works, consolidation of those best practices, so that when you start to reform, when you've got some new challenges coming along, you can really use those best practices as the basis for moving forward. I'll stop sharing those results right now, if I may. That should take me straight back to the main. I do roll over things when I don't want to roll over things. Okay, so here on this screen, I've got each of those 5 stages again, with them now being split horizontally into 3 areas: atmosphere, how team members are feeling, and team leader actions. So you can see now where the source of my questions were, in fact, that you went away and looked at in your subgroups. I asked about what the climate was like. I asked about how team members might be feeling. I asked about what your actions might be. So you can now see where some of those suggestions are coming from. These slides will be available to you on Curator, but yet please do grab them now if these are kind of being useful prompts to you. And I'm looking at some of the stuff in chat. Yeah, you're quite right. Tara was a suggestion, and it's been applauded by Holly, thinking about celebrating milestones as building morale. I think you're absolutely right. Please don't get the sense of there being hard and fast rules, that these areas are fully delineated, that you can't, that they don't merge, that you can use some of these actions in multiple places. Of course you can. I'm only offering this to guide and focus our thinking. So thank you all very much for that. That's our reinforcement of forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, and its various alternative words, thinking how we might apply that for real. So staying with our journey now today on the team, let's start to think about the characteristics of effective teams. Oh, I love this image of all these goldfish being individual goldfish, but now kind of forming that shape of a fish in its own right, and indeed, I hope, a sense of moving forward. Into the chat box, if you will, before I move anywhere off this screen, could you throw in any host of words, phrases that for you describe what the characteristics of effective teams are? And I'm going to be watching that chat box, and I'll just shout them out as they come pouring in. So what are the characteristics of effective teams? Synergy. Support, trust, yes, lovely. Everyone was awake and listening last time. Being motivated, so motivating. Collaboration, yeah, cheer up. Considerate, yeah, to each other, yeah. Sense of purpose for the team, perfect, wonderful. Coordinated, good communication, wonderful. I'm seeing lots of evidence of you pulling out things that you already knew, but that represent what we've been covering today. Fantastic, thank you. You can relax, you can rest. I mean, we could go on, I'm sure, populating the chat box with nothing more than that for the rest of the evening, for the next, you know, best part of, what have we got, 30, 40, 50 minutes, but it would get pretty boring in doing so. So let me offer you instead a series of some 6 headings. These are my invitations for you to take away. And actually, if you look back at the chat, I bet we could actually, you could allocate each of these things into those 6 headings. That a good and effective team needs to have clear objectives, good decision-making processes, trust, cooperation, support, and constructive conflict. Think about that. You don't want, surely, everybody thinking the same, agreeing. It's fine if you're all in agreement and that the decision was a sound one, because then you're all traveling in an appropriate direction. But what if the decision wasn't a sound one? You actually need that difference of view, the diversity of thinking. You need an inclusive atmosphere so that people feel it is safe to contradict what was said, to challenge the decision that was made in order to protect and mitigate the actions of the team. You need clear roles, responsibilities, and sound leadership. You need sound relationships with other groups. And you need to stop and slow the world down and do some analysis of the team's performance. So looking at how the process, how we operate as a team. I have a rather nifty little questionnaire. It's in the appendix of your workbook. I think it's at Appendix C. Oh, no, it's not. It's at Appendix B in your workbook. It is made up of some 60 statements. Guess what? There are 10 of those 60 statements relates to each of these. But it's not that the first 10 relate to clear objectives and the next 10 relate to good decision-making processes. The 60 statements are all jumbled up like they've been in a washing machine or a dryer, yeah? So they are all over the place. Now, what you can do is, for you yourself, think about your team, answer those questions, and then there is the marking sheet with that questionnaire so that you can end up with a score for each of those out of 10, making the total of 60, okay? You could also consider sharing that, if you want to discuss how effective we perceive ourselves to be as a team, you could share that questionnaire with all of your team members. You could get them to complete it. You could ask one of those team members to be the hub who receives all of those back and then marks those questionnaires. I always recommend that the original questionnaire goes back to the individual so that they see their own scores, their own perceptions of the team against each of those 6 items. But that there is one collective graph created which shows the team's view of it. And it can make for some fascinating discussions. You will find that you have some clear front runners where there is pretty much collective agreement that we are good at whichever it is, A, B, C, D, E, or F. But you will also find some where there seems to be a collective agreement that we are less good at that. My recommendation to you would be that you as a team then trace back to the original questionnaire which of those statements there is a consistency that you are of thinking that we're not so good at that. Because actually you're able to then turn those statements into, so what are we going to do about it? And then you can actually think about working consciously on that, maybe using those in some of the the norming bit from the Bruce Tuckman model and theory. So how are we going to operate together? Maybe creating that as a bit of a team charter and using this as the basis for that. One of the things, I've used this questionnaire over probably quite a few years now, if I'm honest, with a whole variety of teams across the public, the private and the voluntary sectors. And I can say now that I'll predict the ones where you are likely to be least strong. Please do go ahead and surprise me. I would love you to surprise me. But the ones where you are probably likely to be least strong are in E, sound relationships with other groups, and F, analysis or process of the team's performance. We get pretty good these days at knowing we've got to have objectives, and actually knowing we need to do something about creating a sense of trust and cooperation. We know we should have clear roles and responsibilities. And if you think about it, those first 4 on the screen right now tend to be inward looking to the team itself. Whereas E and F, E certainly starts to look outward to our relationship with other groups. And yet surely no group is operating, no team is operating in isolation from the rest of the organization or from other teams, and indeed possibly other partners in the sector, so even outside of the organization. And then the reason many teams will say we can't really be doing much on the analysis of the team's performance is we haven't got time to. We haven't got time to stop and analyze it. And my challenge back to all of you is to say, you haven't got time not to stop and analyze it a little bit. So even if all you do as a matter of course, every time you run a team meeting, why not close your team meeting with a bit of a poll about how are we doing as a team? Good, bad, neutral. Yeah. Even if you do that, you'll kind of get some sense of whether you need to dig around with any particular parts of that in order to improve how you work together as a team. So that's my recommendation. That's my challenge to you. That questionnaire is you'll find in Appendix B of the workbook with the 60 questions, along with the instructions for scoring it. If you look at it and you think, I don't understand this, just come back to me in Curator. You've got the whole of next week when you can interact with me in Curator, and I am now looking at that each day, so I'll certainly pick anything up from there. I hope I have recommended a few good reads to you as well. And here's another good read for you. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I would recommend it to you. You can probably see as I build these few slides with you at pace, folks. So go to the book if you would like to learn something more about it. But as I build this in front of your eyes, you can probably see that all of these 3 ideas of the maturity of teams, how they mature through cycles, and then what we've just looked at in terms of characteristics of effective teams, they all kind of build a whole. I don't think I have a preference of one over another, but for you as managers, if you have a familiarity with these tools, you can probably find yourself moving seamlessly between them. So what do we have? He says a significant dysfunction of a team is an absence of trust. And what are the consequences of that? Invulnerability. Because if I don't trust my team members, I'm not going to be able to dare to say, oh, I'm stuck. I need some help. I've got this wrong. So actually, I create this sense of invulnerability about me, and I become very defensive about my work. He says that there could be a fear of conflict. And what I said about the Bruce Tuckman and that storming phase, most of us don't like being there. It's scary stuff. So what we have is this pretense of artificial harmony, and we never unearth the tensions that lie beneath the surface. It's that classic elephant in the room, never gets identified and discussed. If there's a lack of commitment to tasks and moving things forward, there's this sense the consequences are ambiguity. Well, I couldn't commit to that because I had all of these other objectives and priorities as well, or what you told me to do wasn't clear. If there's an avoidance of accountability, then what you get that is not only low standards, but I would dare to suggest falling standards as well over time. And if there's an inattention to results, we're not being held accountable, those two are probably quite closely interlinked. We get this sense of status and ego. So actually, and it does go again with the low and indeed falling standards, people defending what they have achieved. So all of these things on the left-hand side, he suggests, are examples of failure. What he then does is begin to start to think about, well, we as managers have clear responsibilities for addressing these, but equally we are all partners in this. So in terms of the team, we also need to motivate, energize the team towards taking action. So what does he say? Successful teams create trust. So think about the stuff we were just looking at there in terms of each of the stages of Tuckman, and what you as a manager can do to get your team to create trust. Look what I did in that particular setting in that museum. Fear of conflict, actually valuing conflict at the level of it's, you know, the improvement we can get in decision making by actually looking at an issue through different lenses. So really getting people to be bold about why they are seeing things differently, valuing it. Lack of commitment, we need to encourage commitment, praise it. And look what some of you were saying in your comments there earlier about the celebrating achievements part and seeing that as building morale. Promote accountability, hold people to account for tasks that have been delegated, and celebrate those results for, you know, achievements of individuals and collective achievements of a whole team. Oh, that's just brought a story back to my mind about one of the best managers I ever had. We were all, even then, years ago, working remotely. He used to get us back into the office about once a month, and he would have an outside catering company come and bring us dinner, which is very nice. And we would discuss, you know, things that were working well, things that weren't working so well. And from time to time, he used to bring a bottle of champagne, and he would present the bottle of champagne to someone whose achievements or results he wanted us to celebrate. And he didn't just present it, but he actually got that person to talk about what they'd achieved, how they'd achieved it, what barriers they'd encountered, how they'd overcome them. And of course, we shared that bottle of champagne together. On one occasion, we'd all seen the bottle of champagne over there in the corner. So we were kind of going, who's up for the champagne tonight then? And then when it came to the moment, he went and got it. And he didn't give the champagne to one of us. He gave it all collectively to the team as a whole, because something had gone wrong and we all had a part to play in it. And he actually said, let's celebrate the fact that we can talk about this. It's not about blaming any one of us. We all need to take responsibility for it. So let's look at what went wrong, because then we can learn from it and what are we going to do in the future. And that was probably, you know, one of the best bottles of champagne, because we laughed about our mistakes as well. Now, champagne might not be an appropriate thing for you to do and to have, but, you know, think about how you could replicate that maybe in some way. So as a manager, if there's an absence of trust, if there's a nervousness around the place, one of the best things you can do is to go first, lead the way, role model. You need to go mining for conflict. So do you remember in the one-to-ones, one of the things I said that I thought you should always make sure you have in your agendas for your one-to-ones is saying, is everything going as far as you are concerned in the wider team? Are you getting on with everybody? Is, you know, are there any pinch points, any tensions that you've got? So go mining for conflict. If there's lack of commitment, force that clarity and closure. There's my bottle of champagne story, yeah? Confront difficult issues as well. So kind of get things out on the table, deal with them so that you can move on. And then focus on collective outcomes and celebrate those in the round. So those are some of the essences of what Patrick Lencioni talks about. A good read, you'll find plenty out there on YouTube with him talking about this himself. So please do go out there and visit that yourselves. So at this stage, I'm watching my time. I want to move us on now to something around our management styles, where this is known as the leadership continuum and comes from two people, Tannenbaum and Schmidt, where they talk about if a manager uses their authority in a task that they are setting for a whole team, and indeed makes the decision associated with that task and announces it, then this is where their position is on that far left-hand side of this leadership continuum. If you go all the way to the opposite end, of course, if the manager sets the task, but leaves the area of the freedom for the staff member and the team absolute, so that the group can make the decision about how they want to proceed, where they want to get to, then the area of freedom for the staff members is total. There are various positions then in the middle. So the second one from the left, here the manager makes the decision and explains it. So there's somewhat more freedom for the staff members maybe, but the majority still lies with the manager. That middle point, the manager gets suggestions, the manager still makes the decision, but there is a much more collaborative feel to it at that point. And then the one which is the second from the right-hand side, where the manager sets the task, defines the limits, but lets the group get on and make the decision and the processes towards it. I don't know if any of you have ever done that. What's on my screen right now, a zip wire. Here's a zip wire that is in fact in the same place where you can see my backdrop behind me at Lake Tahoe. So I've done that very zip wire in my full ski gear with my ski boots on, etc. Now, thrilling experience. Either people are terrified by it or it's a thrilling experience. And I wanted just to share this with you, calling it zip wire fun, because with my previous slide, if I come back one for the moment, there's my zip wire. And when you're on that zip wire, you kind of can't just yank on a brake and stop mid-flight. Once you're off, you're going all the way to the very end. But if that analogy works for you, whenever you are faced with managing the team, managing a situation, having to make a decision about how do I handle this? Do I make the decision and announce it? How much freedom can I give my team to decide and make progress in it? I'd like you to think of it like that zip wire, choosing where you are going to hang off that zip wire, what sort of stance you are going to take in it. So another of the factors which I didn't get time to share with you yesterday is around this notion of situational leadership. And there are some similarities here between these two, where you might like to consider with either an individual or a whole team, the degree to which the team needs you to give them full and complete direction. So I'm looking at the lower axis here. So to the far right hand side, the team needs absolute high directive direction from me. Or they're actually really experienced. They don't need much direction from me at all. They might need some parameters setting, but not much more beyond that. And then the vertical axis describes the degree of supportive behavior that you need to give the individuals and or the team. And so again, that might move from high to relative low level of support. And you're beginning to see some words and phrases in there with that parabola, that snake that runs through all of this. So in the bottom right-hand quadrant, you might adopt a quite high directive. So it's very much a telling sort of sense to them. There's relatively little support. That's the degree of direction. Or do you move more into a selling type, an influencing type of relationship where you are persuading, explaining? So you are giving them both a high degree of direction, but you do trust them and you're providing with them the support so that they can go ahead and work on something. Is it then that they are now evidencing that they really don't need much direction from you at all, because you can now move into a more participatory type of relationship? You're almost more a peer. You're providing them with plenty of support, but you're more of a peer. Or actually, can you move into giving them the parameters, delegating the task, just observing, monitoring from afar and knowing that they're going to deliver on it? Now, I'm going to give you an activity which is going to take almost the balance of our work together today. And I can see I'm just on time, which is great. You're going to be working in subgroups, 3 subgroups this time. And each of you as subgroups is going to be asked to take on just one of the case studies. That you'll find the case studies in the workbook. So if you can go to the workbook, oh, now actually, I think the sections are slightly out here. Oh, I should have looked this up and I didn't. Let me think. We're in, oh no, actually it might be in session 6. You're looking for the work. If any of you find it before I do, can you please yell it out, stick it in the chat box, please. The case studies are called the budget shortfall, the local needs survey, and the forthcoming conference. Wonderful, Tara, you're a star. Thank you. Starting page 40. That is magic. Could group 1 take the budget shortfall in terms of giving feedback on it? Could group 2 take the local needs survey? Could group 3 please take the forthcoming conference? If you have a chance to look at all 3 of them, that would be great, but I only want feedback on the one I've just allocated to you. In the workbook, each of the case studies finished with questions, and it's those questions that I'm going to ask you to be reporting back against when we meet back in the main room. Is that okay? That makes some sense to you all? I'm looking around the room. I can see some nods. If there are any other thumbs up, nods. I can't move around the room right now. That would be great. If you get stuck, just come back to the main room and ask for any assistance. You have 20 minutes once Lucy has let you go.
Sure. Group 1 has Daniela, group 2 has Bridget, and group 3 has Gibson. So all the best.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you, Lucy. Let me make a note of where. Right, that's great. Okay, so what I'd like to do to conclude for today is ask for a spokesperson for each room to focus solely on the one case study that you had, giving me your senses, your responses to the questions that were embedded at the bottom of each of them. So room 1, we had Daniela, Jerry, Mara, and Shannon. Who'll speak for us?
I can go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniela.
Yeah. So we had a budget shortfall. So in which basically the organization had a budget shortfall, and the director decides, take decision, communicate it to all of the people that are working with him, very directive, no space for including his team in the decision making. People might feel marginalized, not included, and having to do this task just because they were told so. Some pros could be like time saving.
Yeah.
It's a specific action plan,
yeah.
A clear instruction if the team is disengaged, or if people are brand new and they don't know exactly what to do. And cons, of course, as I was saying, people feel marginalized, not included. There might be other possibilities of collecting this budget shortfall. Instead, this is only one approach. If it fails, it fails.
Yes, very high risk, isn't it?
High risk, yeah. And so another approach that the manager could have done would have been to include people and get their opinion in what could be different ways of collecting these additional funds that are needed. Explain better what is the issue to be solved, and then maybe there might be more solutions that would come out of that.
Super, wonderful job, and a very nice illustration of, in some circumstances, this might be exactly the right stance to take. But here, from what we're reading, even in no matter how short those case studies are, that probably was not the wisest thing to do. So Daniela, thank you. Room 2, we had Bridget, Holly, Scott and Tarek. You therefore had the local needs survey.
You all mind if I start and tap you in if I miss anything? Cool. So I wanted to volunteer because I'm pretty sure I'm the reason we got slightly off track from what you asked us to do in the meeting. I mean, in our breakout group, even though I feel it was one of the most productive conversations that I've had thus far in the discussion. We started by labeling the approach. We found it interesting because we thought it really kind of lay between approaches 2 and 3 on that hierarchy, because while he asked for that feedback, sorry, did we even get a program? Yeah, no, we didn't get a pronoun. While they asked for feedback, they came in kind of setting the tone of the conversation, which often stifles creativity. So we kind of put it between the 2.
Fine.
And then where we derailed was when the question on how would you react, I reacted relatively poorly, which started an excellent series of conversations of where we were sharing similar experiences or how we handled those situations as line managers. So unfortunately, we didn't get to questions 3 and 4 on this case study itself, but we got 2 answers amongst ourselves for things that had affected us.
And that's absolutely fine. I really don't mind how you use, the exercises that I offer you. If it takes you off in a different direction that is more productive, that is fine. I only offer you vehicles for this. So you're right. I am very often faced with this is somewhere between the consultative permissive style, but it's really open to interpretation. And I think that's what you illustrated by those reactions that were coming up in your group. So thank you for that. Room 3, I'm watching time because I want to be as close to finish time and a respecter of time as I can be. So I'm aware of hurrying us through it. So room 3, Gibson, Heber, Tara and Zach, and you had the forthcoming conference. So what are your reflections on that, please? Have I got a spokesperson? One of you go for it, be bold.
I can jump in, but
excellent.
Oh, did someone else start talking at the same time? No, okay, but others jump in. So I'm not sure we used the right frame for picking the style. We used the leadership models quadrant that you had put up. And so we thought that this was definitely the telling style. There was not a lot of participation or consultation at all. It was very directive. We weren't impressed. We didn't think it was a good approach. We thought that the team member reactions would vary dramatically because it seems like one person was consulted closely, so that person was probably pretty happy, and other people probably felt very left out. Yeah. And that just the manager didn't do a good job of explaining like what the goal was, why they were changing the system that they had used in the past for approaching this, and why even if her choice of the people for the new project team was very deliberative, she didn't explain it in any way to inspire confidence or get buy-in. We did say on the pros and cons, or just kind of continuing to evaluate it, that she seemed to want to hold on to a lot of control for the beginning. So she kind of, but did send them away and kind of said they had free reign to come back with a plan, but then it was going to really be kind of workshopped by the team. But then again, they would be sent away and given quite a bit of authority to go on from there, only needing to inform her. And we said kind of how else they might have, that Joe could have approached it, definitely to be more consultative, to request feedback, kind of in the problem solving, that we thought it would have gone over much better. Interestingly, we read the second case study after this, and we all really liked that approach. So I don't know what that says about us and Holly. We must be very different people or have had different experiences. We thought it was great. Yeah, and we just thought that Joe should have sold, like, yeah, kind of been, it would have been better to be in the selling quadrant for this kind of situation.
Lovely. No, I think you have all three groups have referred to the two models that I wanted you to, even though it wasn't clear that I'd got it titled as Hersey and Blanchard, that was the quadrant model. So that was absolutely fine. Okay. And actually, the contradictions in view, you know, the perception contradictions in view about whether approach in the local needs survey was better than the forthcoming conference or vice versa, illustrates beautifully what we were looking at yesterday in terms of intent versus impact. Because I don't think these managers, any of them, in the budget shortfall, local needs survey or forthcoming conference are evil by any means. Their intent was probably sound and solid. Their execution was a bit flaky at times. And do you know what? We're always going to be faced with that, because we can kind of land something well for one, our impact can work well for one and not for another. We will always be faced with that complexity, that set of dilemmas. Thank you so much for doing that. I am aware I am just over the time. I do not want to take any more of your time now, but I hope you can now see I'm beginning even more so to pull together our journey so that you are applying this in some contexts, and some contexts where I hope you can relate to them to varying degrees. I'm tending to think you are, because it's taking you out into your own environments in your heads and in your discussion. Thank you all so much. Do your reflection overnight. Come back fresh tomorrow, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Right, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Bye.